My husband was very colorful. As soon as he came home, he would take me to the room, but after making love for 2 minutes, he would fall asleep. My youth was at its peak. It was difficult for me to control my emotions. You will be shocked to know what happened. Before we proceed with the video, let me remind you to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If you liked our previous video, please type yes in the comments below. Mom, what kind of person have you married me off to? He acts all charming, but in reality, he is nothing but a firecracker with no substance. Hearing this, Mom stared at me with wide eyes, her hands on her ears, and said, "Oh, Fiza, have some shame. How can you talk like this about your husband in front of your mother? What do you want me to do? You're the one who tied me to him. Now you have to figure it out." I sat down in front of her and began reciting Astaghfirullah, asking for forgiveness. Angrily, I said, "Mom, your reciting prayers won't solve my problem. Tell me, what should I do with your son-in-law?" Mom replied, "Just have some shame. Everything will work out on its own." She went back to her chores in the kitchen, leaving me furious. I had come back from my in-laws' house in the morning and now had to return in the evening. I thought I would tell Mom and she would offer advice, argue with my husband, or scold my in-laws. But instead, she gave me a lesson in modesty and decorum. In my anger, I stormed out and went next door to my friend Zebi's house. She was surprised to see me and said, "Fiza, you came back after marriage for the first time today?" It was our first meeting since my wedding. I hugged her and began crying. She quickly became worried and asked, "What happened? Why are you crying?" I hesitated about whether to share my problem with Zebi. She was unmarried, but then I thought, she's my friend and I should tell her. So I sat in her room, crying, and told her that my husband can't give me more than 2 minutes of his time. He just talks and then goes to sleep. I am starving for happiness. Sometimes I wonder if he's even a man. Zebi's jaw dropped. She said, "Oh, Fiza, how can this be? You've been wronged. Your mother should have thought carefully before getting you married like this. No one just marries off their daughter to anyone they find on the street." Zebi, though unmarried, knew enough about relationships. She sat down in front of me, holding her face, and said, "There must be a solution to this problem." I cried, "What solution? Mom is reciting prayers and I don't know what else to do. I'm scared of my in-laws. I don't know what to say or whom to cry to. That's why I came to you. Please give me some advice." Zebi stared at my face for a while and then said, "Don't worry, let me think and ask around. I'll tell you what can be done." I kept crying for a while, and then in the evening, I returned home. Mom was waiting for me, upset and angry. She asked, "Where have you been all this time?" I said, "Mom, I always visit Zebi like this." She replied, "Before, it was different, but now you're married. When you come to your parents' house, you should stay inside the house. Don't go around too much, or your in-laws might think you're roaming around." I made a face at her and turned to go inside. Then suddenly a thought crossed my mind and I turned back. Mom looked at me and asked, "Tell me the truth, Fiza. You didn't say anything in front of Zebi, did you?" I avoided eye contact. Mom quickly approached me and said, "Did you tell Zebi anything about your husband? Did you say anything about him?" Tears started rolling down my cheeks, and Mom put her hand on her head. She said, "I shouldn't have let you go there. How could you have shared this with someone? Tomorrow, the whole neighborhood will know, and then what will be left of your and your husband's honor? Have some sense. Don't you know Zebi's habits?" Mom said, as she sat down with her head in her hands. I sat at her feet and said, "Mom, you never listened to me. Zebi is my only friend, and if I can't share my pain with her, then who else can I?" Mom struck my head with her hand and said, "It was my mistake to let you go to her house. I should have known you have no sense. I thought I'd marry you off at 15, thinking you'd fulfill your duties properly. What will happen if I die tomorrow? But you've taken it upon yourself to bring shame upon me. At least keep such matters to yourself. A husband and wife's issues should stay between them." Mom then left for her ablutions, leaving me crying in silence. I had no one else to turn to. To her, I was shameless, and I felt trapped in my own home. The whole evening, I remained lost in sorrow. Then around 9 in the evening, my husband came all dressed up to pick me up. His eyes were accentuated with thick kohl, wearing a black kurta and shalwar with buttons up to his neck, and his hair oiled and set in place. As soon as he saw Mom, he greeted her warmly, and Mom was thrilled. She thought there couldn't be a more handsome or good-hearted man than Shahbaz. To her, he seemed like the perfect man, pious and pure. But in my eyes, he was nothing but a charming man with a colorful personality, a dreamer who could only talk but not do anything. Despite my heart burning with frustration, Mom placed a chicken pilaf in front of him, and he ate it with relish, praising her for the food. Then he said, "Now, please excuse me. I am taking Fiza with me." Mom immediately gestured for me to leave with him. I tried to express my pain through my gestures, not wanting to go, but Mom glared at me so fiercely that I had no choice but to take Shahbaz's hand and leave my mother's doorstep. Throughout the journey, Shahbaz kept making jokes, then stopped at one place to buy me ice cream and praised me endlessly, calling me different names like Delight or Moonlit. At first, I enjoyed this attention, but after a month of marriage, when my emotions found no peace, those names started to feel like poison. Even now, as he held my hand and expressed his affection, saying that a day without me felt like a mountain to him, I couldn't help but feel a burning discomfort in my heart. He came closer and said, "Fiza, no girl could be as beautiful as you." Something in me stirred, and I responded, "If that's true, then why don't you fulfill your obligations?" He suddenly stepped back, surprised, and asked, "What obligation, Fiza? What do you want?" I froze, unable to say it, unable to express that what I wanted was my marital rights. After buying me ice cream, he took me back home, still holding my hand in front of his sisters. He wasn't embarrassed at all. He openly held my hand, expressing his love for me, and this is exactly why I always called him a man with a colorful personality. I didn't plan on staying outside the room for long. Not only was I extremely tired, but I also felt emotionally drained and overwhelmed by my own feelings. So I headed to my room shortly after. He followed me inside and sat on the bed next to me. I looked at him with longing and said, "I feel so lonely now. Please complete me." In veiled words, I expressed my heart's emotions. He pulled me close to his chest, kissed my forehead, and began expressing even more love. I felt a sense of happiness, thinking that maybe tonight he would fulfill my desires. But after 2 minutes, he pulled away and said, "Let's sleep now, Fiza. It's getting late. Rest well." With that, he turned over, and soon the room was filled with his snoring. I felt as if a weight had been placed on my heart. I got up and stood by the window. The moon was shining brightly, casting its full radiance over the night. As I gazed at the moon, I felt like I was lost in a dark and winding path. I was only 15 years old when my mother told me that she wanted to marry me off. I was shocked by her words and immediately refused, saying, "Mom, I don't want to get married yet. I've just taken my 10th grade exams. I still want to study more." My mother in tears explained, "Your father passed away a long time ago. I'm raising you with great difficulty, and you're growing up so fast. I'm afraid someone might look at you with ill intentions. That's why I want to marry you off with respect before something happens." I fell silent after hearing her words. She started looking for potential suitors for me. I was fair-skinned, beautiful, and knew how to manage household chores, which many people knew. So when Mom brought up the idea of my marriage, a family acquaintance recommended Shahbaz's proposal. Mom immediately liked him, but I had never even seen him. Without consulting me, she finalized the match. I was heartbroken because of my mother's decision to marry me off at such a young age. But after the engagement, strange feelings began stirring in me. As I stood in front of the mirror, I looked at myself and suddenly felt grown up. I felt like I was no longer a little girl. I would sometimes try on Mom's sari or wear her jewelry and look at myself in the mirror. It was a delightful feeling, thinking that I too would have a partner in life who would love me, cherish me, and admire me. I thought I would be safe in his arms. And maybe this was the reason why my emotions were changing, and the excitement of youth was slowly awakening within me. As my wedding day approached, Zebi, my best friend, kept whispering things in my ear that made me feel shy and excited. Both Zebi and I were fond of watching Indian movies, and that's where we learned so many things. Zebi had brought me a nightdress from somewhere and told me, "Wear this in front of your husband. He will be completely enchanted by you." She said, There are 4 unmarried sisters-in-law at your house. If you want to carve your place, you need to make sure your husband is completely captivated by you. If not, your sisters-in-law won't let you live in peace. I took these words to heart. Zebi had always been a trusted friend, and I followed her advice without question. She had also told me, if you don't make an effort to keep your husband interested, your sisters-in-law will make your life miserable. Those words stuck with me, and I thought of them often as my wedding day neared. I realized that, as Zebi had said, the role of the wife in a new home could be very challenging. Not only was there the pressure to please my husband, but I also had to navigate the complicated relationships with my sisters-in-law. I had to make sure I stood out, that my husband noticed me above all others. Zebi wasn't just a friend. She was like a mentor to me in matters of life and relationships. I looked up to her, and I followed her advice meticulously. She had been through similar experiences and understood the dynamics of married life better than I did. She knew how to handle men and how to secure a place in a new family, and I trusted her insights. Zebi had always encouraged me to take charge of my life and relationships, and I felt that her advice would help me survive the challenges of married life. Her words were like a guidebook for me, and I was eager to follow them, hoping that they would make me the ideal wife in my new home. As the days went by, I started feeling a strange mixture of anticipation and fear. On one hand, I was excited to start a new chapter in my life with Shahbaz, but on the other hand, I was nervous about how things would unfold. The pressure from my family, especially from Mom, was immense. She had high expectations for me, and I didn't want to disappoint her. The weight of her hopes and dreams rested on my shoulders, and I felt it with every passing day. I couldn't shake the feeling that this marriage wasn't just about me. It was about fulfilling my mother's wishes and meeting the expectations that had been set for me. But still, despite all the external pressures, there was a part of me that wanted to experience love and connection. I wanted to feel special, to have someone who would look at me with affection and desire. I hoped Shahbaz would be that person, the one who would make all my dreams come true. I wanted to feel like I mattered, like I was more than just a daughter being married off for the sake of tradition. I wanted to feel seen and valued for who I was. This whirlwind of emotions, excitement, fear, anticipation, and longing was overwhelming. I had no idea what the future held, but I knew that the journey ahead was going to be much more complicated than I had imagined. There were going to be challenges, and I wasn't sure if I was ready for them. But one thing was certain. I was entering into a new world, and I had no choice but to face it head on. And then the day of my wedding finally arrived. Not only did I look beautiful as a bride, but I also carried many dreams and desires with me as I stepped into Shahbaz's home. After waiting for a while, when he finally came into the room and saw me, he praised me in such a way that I just kept listening. Then he pulled me into his arms, expressing his love, and gently said, "I'm changing my clothes. You should change too. It's getting late." I thought that after changing, he would spend quality time with me. But when I changed and returned, he was already deep in sleep, snoring away. I took one look at myself in the mirror, wearing the beautiful night dress, feeling helpless. Standing in the room, frustrated, I quickly changed out of the dress and tossed and turned the entire night, restless. But none of it seemed to affect my husband. He woke up with the morning sun, completely oblivious to the turmoil I had gone through the night before. I sat there with a disgruntled face, expecting him to notice my mood and try to make amends. But nothing happened. He spoke to me with love, as usual, but he had no idea I was upset. He didn't realize how much pain he had caused me by sleeping soundly while I lay there in emotional distress. I tried to convince myself that maybe he was tired from the wedding preparations, but the same thing happened the next night, and then again on every following night. My husband was always kind to me, and he treated me with respect, even in front of his sisters. They treated me with great respect as well, and in every way I had a life filled with luxury and care. But the only issue was the disconnect in our relationship. The emotional turmoil I was going through was not felt by him. He would speak to me lovingly for 2 minutes, then turn over and fall into a deep sleep. I would lie awake, cursing myself and him. I thought that after returning from my mother's house, he would realize what was missing in our relationship and give me what I needed. But again, nothing changed. He slept deeply while I remained wide awake, sitting there in silence, wondering if he even cared. The next day I received a call from Zebi. She asked, "Tell me the truth. Has your husband not—" She didn't finish the sentence and I broke down into tears. It was as though all the emotions I had been holding back for days flooded out at once. There was no one around me. I locked the door of the room and cried, telling Zebi, "I don't understand. What have I done wrong? And my mother doesn't even seem to care. What should I do?" Zebi, in her calm tone, said, "I have found a remedy for you. You need to take 2 desi eggs and mix them with milk, then feed them to your husband. And remember, the eggs must be desi eggs." I was taken aback by what she said and asked, "Where did you learn this remedy from? You're not even married, and no one around here knows anything like this." Zebi scolded me lightly and said, "I've given you a helpful suggestion. If you want your husband's love, follow it. Just do it, and you will see the results." After a few moments, she hung up the phone, leaving me in a state of confusion and uncertainty. Immediately, I stepped out of my room and called my youngest sister-in-law, who was about 8 years old. She came running to me and said, "Yes, Bobby, what do you need?" I quickly handed her some money and said, "Go and get me some desi eggs." As I spoke, my elder sister-in-law overheard and came out asking, "Bobby, what are you going to do with desi eggs? We already have farm eggs in the house." She continued, "We have chickens in the backyard, and they lay eggs every day." I gave her a sharp look and didn't respond. I pointed to the younger sister-in-law and asked her to go. Without any hesitation, she left for the shop, while the older sister silently returned to her room. A little while later, the desi eggs arrived. At around midnight, I mixed 2 desi eggs into a glass of milk and went to Shabazz. I gently offered him the glass, and for a long time, he just stared at me without saying anything. I nervously asked, "What's wrong?" He didn't respond. Instead, he quietly drank the entire glass of milk, finishing it slowly. Afterward, he pulled me into his arms and gently pushed me onto the bed. In an instant, my breath caught, and I felt a momentary panic. But reality struck when he exerted his full strength on me, and the act became overwhelming. I was so overwhelmed with pain that breathing felt impossible. It was as if my senses were numbed, and I couldn't understand what was happening. I struggled, feeling trapped, and finally mustered enough strength to get up and walk to the washroom. When I returned, I found Shabazz sitting on the bed, staring at me with intense, almost unreadable eyes. This wasn't the same Shabazz I had known, the man who was loving and affectionate toward me. This felt different, colder. I approached him anxiously, trying to understand what had changed. "What's wrong with you?" I asked, fear creeping into my voice. He looked at me and his tone was cold as he replied, "This is what you wanted, right? I've fulfilled your wish." He turned his face away, and for the first time I felt like he was angry with me. Confused, I quickly sat next to him and said, "Shabazz, what's wrong with you? How could you do this? You've hurt me so much, and I'm still in pain." Without a word, he turned over on the bed, his back facing me. The silent response made me realize that he was indeed upset. Until then, Shabazz had never been upset with me, and I had never seen him so distant. He had always praised me, loved me, and made me feel like the center of his world. But now, everything had changed. How could I bear this distance from him? I grabbed his arm, gently shaking him, trying to wake him from his anger, asking, "Shabazz, what's wrong? Please tell me." He sat up and looked at me with anger in his eyes. "What do you tell people about our private matters?" he asked, his voice filled with embarrassment and frustration. "I'm ashamed that you've shared our personal things with your friend. I can't even imagine what you've said about me." I stood there shocked by his words, my eyes filling with tears. I had no idea that talking to Zebi about our relationship would cause such an issue. I lowered my head in shame, feeling completely humiliated. Shabazz then pulled me closer, holding me tightly and said, "I've always thought of you as a young girl, someone who wanted to continue her studies. I restrained my feelings for you because I wanted to respect your future. But now you've made a fool of me. Your friend has spread rumors about me throughout the neighborhood, calling me impotent, and I only found out through a friend. I never expected that you would be the one to bring disgrace upon me." I stood frozen in shock. Shahbaz's words cut through me like a knife. I had never imagined that talking to Zebi, someone I trusted, could destroy my marriage. I felt sick to my stomach, torn between my love for Shahbaz and my friendship with Zebi. I had shared my deepest emotions with Zebi, thinking I could confide in her, but now it seemed I had unknowingly caused irreparable harm. Shahbaz continued, "I couldn't believe it when I first heard this. So I returned home early today to confront you about it. And by sheer fate, I overheard you and Zebi discussing everything. I now know exactly why you mixed those eggs into the milk. It was because of her suggestion, wasn't it? I know all about it. I've been humiliated enough, and I won't tolerate any more disgrace." I felt my heart shatter as he spoke, and tears flowed freely from my eyes. How could I have made such a huge mistake? I had wanted to feel loved, wanted to feel that Shahbaz cared for me, but now I had lost his respect and trust. The pain of his words was almost unbearable. He continued, "I've always tried to be patient with you, keeping my feelings in check, waiting for the right time to bring us closer. I was thinking about your future, your education, and now you've destroyed everything with your careless actions. Your friend made sure to spread those rumors, and I found out from my own friends. I can't believe this is how you've repaid my love." I was overwhelmed by guilt and sadness. "Shahbaz, I never meant to hurt you. I didn't know how serious it would be. I thought I was doing what was right, what I thought would bring us closer. Please forgive me," I said, my voice trembling. He sat there, his face hardened with anger, but his eyes showed a deep sadness that I hadn't seen before. He turned away from me once again and said, "I never thought you would be the one to embarrass me like this. I tried to do everything for you, to respect your wishes, to wait until you were ready. And this is how you repay me?" I sat on the floor, overwhelmed by a sense of shame and hopelessness. I had ruined everything with my ignorance. I had thought that love would solve everything, but instead, I had caused a rift that seemed impossible to mend. Shahbaz had been patient with me, respecting my wishes, but I had pushed him too far. I had violated his trust, and now I wasn't sure if anything could fix the damage. As I sat there quietly crying, Shahbaz got up and walked toward the door. He paused for a moment and turned back to me, his eyes filled with pain. "Just remember this, Fiza. Never let your emotions cloud your judgment. I've given you everything, and this is how you repay me. Don't ever make the mistake of sharing our personal matters again." With those final words, he walked out of the room, leaving me alone in the silence. Without wasting a moment, I immediately joined my hands and said, "I made a mistake. Please forgive me." It suddenly dawned on me that there must be something wrong with me, or perhaps Shahbaz appeared to be a man with a colorful personality. But deep down, he was just a timid person. I should have talked to him directly, discussed our issues openly. But due to my own embarrassment and shyness, I never gathered the courage to speak to him. Instead, I went to my friend and told her everything, not realizing that she would share our private matters with others. Shahbaz took my clasped hands in his and looked at me. His voice was calm but firm as he said, "Do you know, Fiza, that whenever a husband and wife share their private matters outside the bedroom, people start gossiping and having a laugh about it? And it doesn't matter how close the people are, even if they are our relatives. A married couple should always solve their problems within the walls of their room. I too made a mistake by not telling you why I've been distant lately. You see, for the past few days, I've been busy with your admission. I've been working to get you admitted to a prestigious college in this city. I wanted to surprise you with this news, but now I'm sorry it had to come out like this. The fault is also mine. If I had told you why I was distant, you wouldn't have gone and shared this with Zebi. Please learn from this experience. I never wanted to hurt you. Please forgive me for taking out my anger on you." Shahbaz apologized to me, and his words made me feel even smaller than before. I felt like I was the one who had caused this mess, and yet he was taking responsibility for it. He had always been the loving and understanding husband I had wanted, and in that moment, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for his kindness. He pulled me into his arms and said softly, "What's done is done, and we can't undo it. But from now on, let's be careful. I don't want any more misunderstandings between us. I made a promise to him that I would never again confide in anyone about our personal matters, especially not Zebi. After that incident, I never discussed our relationship with anyone again. Shahbaz kept his word and made sure I got admitted to one of the best colleges in the city, and I focused on advancing my education. With time, Shahbaz fulfilled all my rights as a wife, giving me the love and happiness I had always dreamed of. He was truly a loving and caring man, and I began to appreciate him more deeply every day. When we got married, I was young and naive, and I made mistakes that could have torn our relationship apart. But Shahbaz, understanding my immaturity, forgave me, and that forgiveness strengthened our bond. As I grew older and gained more wisdom, I realized just how wrong I had been to share our personal matters with someone outside of our marriage. It was a grave mistake, and I now understand the importance of keeping those things within the walls of our home. Now, I want to share this lesson with every young girl who is about to get married or has already married. Please never share what happens in your room with anyone outside, no matter how close they may be. Even if they are your closest relatives or best friends, you should always keep those intimate details private. Marriage is a sacred bond, and to preserve its sanctity, it's important to keep its matters between you and your partner. By doing so, you protect your relationship from unnecessary misunderstandings and gossip. Looking back, I can see how much I've learned and grown. I once thought that sharing everything with friends or family would ease the burden, but I now know that it only creates complications. My husband, Shahbaz, was always my protector, and the moment I allowed someone else to interfere in our relationship was the moment I almost lost him. But he forgave me, and through that forgiveness, I learned how valuable trust and communication are in a marriage. I want to encourage young women to be mindful of the power they hold in their relationships. A marriage is built on trust, respect, and love, and no one should be allowed to disrupt that bond. If you ever find yourself facing difficult moments in your marriage, talk to your partner, seek to understand each other, and remember that solving problems together is far more powerful than seeking advice from others. Protect your relationship from external interference and cherish the bond you share with your spouse. As I reflect on my marriage, I see that every mistake and every learning experience has only brought Shahbaz and me closer. He continues to be the loving husband I always wanted, and I've learned to appreciate his love in ways I never did before. I am grateful for the life we've built together, and I know now that the best way to keep our love strong is to nurture it privately, within the safety of our own home.